What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. I am your host, Mundungus Creevy, alongside, as always, my co-host, Glenn Hauser, Gage Madrid, and Cameron Parker. How's everybody doing?
Doing well. Over 500.
That's right.
How can we not be doing well, man?
Yeah, if you're not doing well, that's on you.
Seriously, this is some of the best I've felt covering this team and being a fan of this team in as long as I can remember. I mean, we were 6-5 at one point in 2021 during the Vic Fangio days, but I never had that feeling that we could truly overcome the mountain and make the playoffs. This year, it's totally different, and just the energy that the stadium has being at the games recently has been so much fun, man. It's so much fun being a Broncos fan. Fans here in Denver are starting to wear their Broncos gear again. I mean, seeing all these fans at work today just wearing their Broncos gear, it was so awesome.
You know, and I just think it's great because you won five straight, which is it's tied for the longest winning streak in the NFL. Of course, I will say it's the longest just because the Eagles are the Eagles, but I think it's the longest streak in the in the NFL. But like the thing that's just so crazy is they haven't even hit their stride, and I've said numerous times that like they're winning in so many different ways, like they're winning in so many different ways, and this was the first time it felt like where you felt maybe comfortable as the game was wearing on, or going on, then like you're like they really have a chance to not just beat a 7-3 Browns team, but like convincingly beat a Cleveland Browns team that truly had like the best defense in the world.
Mm-hmm. And like Glenn pointed out when we were just chatting off the record, I went live for my post game with like 10 minutes left to go in the game or whatever it was. However, whatever the time was left when they kicked that field goal, because that's when I felt confident that they were going to escape with that win. I can't remember the last time that I felt that confident about a Broncos win that early.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gage, it was so fun too. You're stopping. You're like, and this, and it was awesome. It was a great flavor, man. I loved it. And this was the first game all season that I felt comfortable the entire game. We came out strong, and it didn't feel like we were in danger. Like some of the other games where we may have had a lead. When the other team has scored, there's some, here we go again. And it just didn't feel like that. All facets were clicking on this one. And to handle a team that's ahead of us in the playoff standings for now. So we now have that advantage over them. Should it be a tie? Boy, this is a huge win. And the excitement level is just way up there. It's great.
Yeah. And even going into the show today, there's just a different feeling. Because we know, like, oh my God, we suck. It's not one of those things anymore. But I will say, like, the game we had against the Browns was a big game, especially for like playoff implications. Mm-hmm. But going into the Texans game is now even more important.
Yeah.
And the cool part about that Browns game is I felt that we were more balanced than we have been in the entire season. Offense, defense. We got some run. We got the running game going. We were throwing the ball deep. We still had that stupid end around the Mims. But whatever. Can't be too picky. But I feel like we were very well balanced, and there's still room for improvement.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of where this Broncos team is at. And it's understandable where, Sean is at. Because, like he said before this game, the Broncos hadn't hit their stride yet. And even with the fact that, it was maybe their most complete game to date, they still had flaws, right? Like, and I should say some of the same flaws that we had seen, in weeks prior. Like, of course, one of the biggest, looming things is of, the defense is certainly, has really come to play in terms of the secondary. Now, the run defense, we'll have, a bit of some big chunk plays, here and there. And some players, make some key stops and everything, but the run defense just in general has been pretty suspect still. during this winning streak. So they're still not hitting on all cylinders there, but forcing turnovers at such an alarming rate. Like I joke when I say that the Broncos are playing Big Ten football, but the Broncos are theoretically playing Big Ten football, predicating it on defense and efficient, offense and how they're running it. It's almost like if you were to blend a Barry Alvarez Wisconsin team and a Kirk Ferentz Iowa, team together in one team, which is funny because, that's kind of where Russell Wilson was so successful in Wisconsin, was a Barry Alvarez led, team. So, and now you're starting to see the benefits of how well Russ is playing as an efficient level.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just to kind of pivot back to the run defense a little bit, that is still the one area that I feel like there's a lot of cause for concern. I was looking at PFF grades yesterday just to kind of verify what I was seeing on film, and Jonathan Harris, Alex Singleton, Zach Allen, I believe, had a 29.9 run defense grade in that Browns game. Our highest grading run defending defensive lineman was Tyler Lancaster, who had like 10 snaps in the run defense. So maybe we need to utilize Tyler Lancaster more. Maybe that could be our solution here. I was pounding the table in a video that I made yesterday to sign Matt Ioannidis because I think he could make an impact in the run defense. The fact that he's only 29 and isn't on a team right now is kind of crazy. I may be thinking there's some outside factor there, maybe an injury or maybe something else that he's not on a team by his own choice. But if he's interested in playing, I think the Broncos should give Matt Ioannidis a call to really help solidify this interior defensive line. And Alex Singleton, I'm getting really concerned about him, both in the run defense as well as in coverage, man. He has not been good at all. Yeah, he racks up a high number of tackles, but a lot of those tackles are after he's already given up a big chunk play or they're beyond the line of scrimmage. So I don't know, man. At the end of the day, Alex Singleton is somebody I'm getting really, really concerned about.
Which is an interesting point, Gage, because he's the guy that's signed for 3 years, including this, and Josie's in the last year of his contract. So I wonder if the Broncos are second guessing the fact that they gave him a couple extra years.
Agreed. Because Josie's playing some really good football right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the fascinating thing with this defense, because the run defense is suspect, but the other part of it that's a little suspect to continue that theme is the missed tackles. And when you play as aggressive as the Broncos defense is, it feeds into possible missed tackles. And I mean, Alex Singleton has the most tackles, but he has the most missed tackles as well. So it's just like, so it's just, you're playing with your hair on fire, but you're playing with your hair on fire way too much. Right. Yep. And so I think that like, that's just the area, like they really have to fine tune it. And it's probably one of the reasons why you saw Drew Sanders in a twist of the way things are going, them actually incorporate him in the starting lineup more on the edge versus, in the actual like linebacker room with Josie and Singleton. So getting him reps and getting him adjusted to possibly a new role, I felt like he played rather well in the opportunities that he was given when he was on the field there, when he was on the edge. So I think it's very curious to see, what becomes of that down the line. And I saw Graham ask a question. What is it that if the Broncos are still finding the groove?
If the Broncos are still finding the groove at season's end, but make it to the postseason, is that concerning?
From my perspective, actually, that's a positive, because that's like a big positive, because if they made the postseason and they never hit their stride, what happens if they do hit their stride? Like, you see what I'm saying? So it's like, if they hit their stride and, so I would be more concerned if they're hitting their stride and they didn't make the playoffs versus, they haven't hit their stride yet, but they still managed to, make it to the playoffs, which is, again, it's a huge kudos to let's acquire a head coach with a first-round draft pick, Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm. And what if they hit their stride when they make the playoffs? Like, that could be a big thing, if they want to eke out a playoff upset in the wild card round, that could be where they need to hit their stride, is in those latter weeks of the season. You want to hit your stride in December. That is when the winds of change a blow in the NFL. So that's when you really start to show yourself as either a contender or a pretender. So for the Broncos, if they never hit their stride until end of the year, or hell, even going into next year, I again think that's just only positive, because that just shows how much we can build off of. The Broncos are finding ways to win football games right now, and they're not even playing their best ball right now. That's exciting. That means that this team is only going up and up and up. And again, I feel like we had to hit rock bottom to get to this point. Rock bottom was obviously the South Beach Slaughter. But after that game, this team has just completely elevated their level of play. They made the changes to obviously get rid of Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, to start playing Jaquan McMillan in the nickel. Obviously, they got rid of Insane Bassey as well. More and more of the young guys on the edge, getting Baron Browning back. The Broncos are 5-0 ever since Baron Browning made his return. I don't think there's much of a coincidence there. At the end of the day, man, the team has gone with a youth movement on defense. They've really found their identity on offense. And arguably the whole year, their special teams has been really, really sound. So this team is playing well in all three phases. And I don't remember the last time a Broncos team played well in all three phases. I can kind of think back to 2012. That first year with Peyton Manning was kind of the last time the Broncos had truly a complete team all the way around.
And one of the cool things – oh, go ahead, Mike. I was going to say, one of the cool things, too, with this team at this point is the confidence level is sky high. The teamwork is all there. The communication has been just so critical. And it was cool, like when we met with Nick Ferguson before the Jets game, and the Broncos had been struggling at that point. The thing he said that was really lacking was communication amongst the defenders. And since then, that's been one of the major things. And as we look ahead, the Broncos have some very winnable games in these last 6 games, even though 2 of them are at home. You've got the Texans, you've got Chargers twice, we have the Lions, Patriots, and then the Raiders game at the, to close out the season is just going to be, that could be the game that gets the Broncos into the playoffs or clinches a berth. But while we were always predicting that the Broncos could lose against the Lions, they've had some very questionable performances the last 2 weeks, barely eking out like a crazy comeback against the Bears in the last 4 minutes, and then losing on Thanksgiving Day against the Packers. We have a real opportunity here to finish this season at 11-6. This could be something crazy after that start.
Well, I think this game against the Browns is probably the second biggest step that you saw this season, right? So the first one was right after the Packers game, where you saw the defense figure it out, right? And this one, you saw the offense start to catch up. Like, I still think there's room for improvement. I don't think we're there yet, but you saw the offense catch up. One of the biggest things with the offense and how it was performing, though, is you saw nothing from Jerry Jeudy. It was a lot of Cortland Sutton. And then Samaje Perine, Javonte Williams. We even saw a lot more Marvin Mims. But Jerry Jeudy had 1 catch the entire game, I think.
Yeah, but I think that the beautiful thing about Jerry Jeudy, though, is he's winning in other areas. Like, he's actually winning in some of the run blocking areas. Like, he's affecting the game and when he's still on the field. Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know, me and Nick Kendall started this whole Iowa and Nebraska bet many years ago. It is a friendly bet that whoever wins, has to have their profile pic, as something like of their team or of the team that won. And so obviously Iowa beat Nebraska in a very predictable game. Very
controversial.
No, I was going to say a very predictable
extra
game.
12 seconds. Controversial.
No, I'm just saying like a very predictable game. When you watch Nebraska and you watched Iowa so far this year, it was a very predictable game. So I will be changing. I think I've set a alarm on my phone for Friday at 5:30 in the morning. To change my.
It's that critical.
For like 5:30 in the morning to change my profile picture back to where it was. So
yeah.
But to finish what I was saying though, He's just winning in other areas. And I think that's the beautiful thing about a winning streak of where things are right now. And, you touched a little bit on this, Glenn, but it's like the importance, and maybe it's just the sentimental value with the players within this locker room. But for the first time, really since 2016, you see guys have the chance to play meaningful football. Like true meaningful football. And when you are playing meaningful football, you start to reap the benefit of a lot of players that were really struggling. Hence, why coaching has been so important. Like Lloyd Cushenberry is maybe the best center in football right now. And he's playing at such an exceptionally high level, and Jerry Jeudy, like you said, is winning in other areas. Cortland Sutton, he's actually playing way better than his 2019 form. So like guys are playing at their elite level, or elite-ish level, if you will, from what we've seen, in many of the years that they've been on this team. So they're playing at such a high level right now, and they haven't even hit their stride.
And what's interesting with that, Cam, is that a lot of times when there's a losing culture and players have not made the playoffs, and really no one in that locker room has actually has played in a playoff game for the Denver Broncos, which is an astounding figure, including, our fave Justin Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
Generally what happens is you have to ship those guys out and replace them with other players to mix and get that winning culture happening. And that didn't have to happen here. We changed the coaching staff, and that is the impetus for this changing. And it's really spectacular. And we have great leadership on both sides of the ball, and that has helped as well. So it's the sky's the limit for these guys. It really seems. And the fact that there's confidence and there's excitement and just the way they carry themselves is so much different than they had been. It's really exciting.
And I was going to say, like to finish it up too, is like when you are a losing culture too, it also breeds really bad habits, and it goes to everybody within the locker room, and it's bad habits on the football field, right? Like it's bad habits on the football field. So like Lloyd Cushenberry, for example, like we just talked about Lloyd Cushenberry, he was a very high, draft pick, if you will. A lot of people really considered him a high draft pick coming out of LSU. He was Joe Burrow probably even called him, a integral part of maybe one of the best offenses we've seen in NCAA history, and he comes to the Broncos, and because of all the situations that we've seen, he's not playing great. Jerry Jeudy is another great example. Like he's playing at actually a pretty decent level. He's not racking in some of the targets, but again, he's winning in other areas. Like it was funny, but you would never see him fake pass against the Minnesota Vikings or do things that are like, like if he felt very comfortable, which was very funny. And it was objectively one of the best plays of the year, by the way. But
it's unbelievable.
But yeah,
so
like you're just starting to see the Broncos really feel their oats a little bit as a team, and I think that just really a huge credit goes to Sean Payton and again, like just the whole defense as a whole. Guys like Vance Joseph and the offensive line of Zach Strief, again deserves so many props, for how this thing is going.
And I really want to give Zach Strief some flowers here because he feels like a coach. Yes, flowers. He feels
Shout
like
out,
a
Michael.
coach that players want to play for. Butch Barry was the complete opposite of that. He was somebody who obviously left sticky notes in a player's locker room whenever they'd have a poor performance. He wouldn't go out and actively try to nurture the player, point out what they did wrong. There was just so many things like that. Zach Strief has been in the trenches, and he's been in the trenches for Sean Payton. He knows what the standard is for this team, what Sean Payton expects from the offensive line. And at the end of the day, man, I just feel like what Zach Strief has been able to do for this group, the way that he's turned around Lloyd Cushenberry's level of play, the way that he's been able to help Quinn Miners take his game to the next level. Mike McGlinchey, it's taken some time, but I feel like as the weeks have gone on, he's definitely improved his play, especially in pass pro. I think he's always been pretty solid overall as a run blocker. Garrett Bowles is playing some of the best ball of his career right now, and then Ben Powers as well. Like this whole unit is gelling. They're playing cohesive football. They've played, I believe, every single snap together. Even Quinn Bailey, when he's coming in on jumbo packages, is playing really well. The Broncos actually have strong depth on the offensive line. If, knock on wood, one of these guys does go down, they have Cam Fleming who can step in at tackle right away. I mean, I'm so confident right now in this offensive line. And hell, even guys like Luke Wattenberg, who I gave a lot of grief to last season for his lack of development, apparently he's making some significant strides in that building, and they're really, really happy with where Luke Wattenberg is. So the entire offensive line is just performing at a really high level right now, from the starters to the depth guys, and that all starts with Zach Strief.
Well, there's two things I wanted to mention about the offensive line. One, Garrett Bowles shut down Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett had nothing. And two, Cushenberry, his contract is up this year. We need to make sure that we are re-signing him to keep the offensive line together. I know that we talked about like McGlinchey and getting a tackle or getting a guard. No, it's starting to work. We're one of the better offensive lines in the league. Leave it the way it is. We have to re-sign Cushenberry.
It's not just Cushenberry either. It's Miners. Like it's Miners and Cushenberry. Like those are two priorities, maybe one of their biggest priorities, in the offseason, and like in re-signing both of those guys. And frankly, Miners is probably your best offensive lineman, so he's going to be paid like a worthy amount as far as in the offseason. And Cushenberry, it'll be interesting to see how Cushenberry deals with, from his agent, and everything in terms of with his play. It's definitely the argument of, this is his best year, and what is the appropriate contract that you're going to be giving him, for a season where this is the best we've ever seen him. So, I think also too, it's worth mentioning this again, is that Russ is playing fantastic football when it matters. He is playing fantastic football when it matters. And there is no quarterback in the NFL that is as automatic in the red zone as Russell Wilson. And this was one of those games where, one more time again, he is making big play after big play. And frankly, it may have been one of his better games, like as far as just overall, like better games. He didn't, get the catch, or Cortland didn't get the catch, but like the zip that he's been able to get on the ball is just night and day better in the red zone than it was, last year. And he's making decisive throws, decisive situations that are, very successful. The only time that, if you're wanting to be really critical of Russ is when he's running the football and he's, maybe carrying it a little bit like a loaf of bread, but like that's really like, that's really maybe one of the biggest things. But even then, to talk about Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi and, Davis Webb, like the creativity of what they're being able to do with the offensive side of the ball is like, to use Michael Burton, I think, is a very underrated part of this. How they've been able to motion, Burton, Samaje Perine, Javonte Williams, all in the backfield together, has really made this creative. And the Wilson pre-snap stuff, pizza, right?
Little Caesars.
Yeah, like the pre-snap stuff that we're seeing week after week from Russ is something that you don't see many game managers do. So I understand the whole game manager argument, but like he is actually doing far more than any game manager. And so he is truly playing as well as we've ever seen him, of course, in a Broncos uniform. So it's so good to see him play when it matters. And it's the Russ of old right now, personally.
Mike, can you pull up Jody's comment again? Because I think that's really worth having on the screen while we're talking about the first one. The most recent one with the stats. I think, Gage, go ahead. I'm sorry. But I think, it's worthy of having this on here while we talk about it.
Agreed. I mean, not only, as the stats are showing here, has Russ been elite in the red zone, literally the best quarterback in the league in the red zone, but pre-snap, I'm so glad that Cam touched on this, because he's been able to get the Broncos into the right look. That tells me Sean Payton trusts him to get the Broncos into the right look pre-snap. He'll get up to the line. He'll do a little dummy cadence. Ready, yellow 80, try to get the defense to declare what they're doing. He'll go kill, alert, make all those little checks, check him into a run, sure up the protection if necessary. His communication with Lloyd Cushenberry has really gotten better over the last few weeks, just in terms of shoring up the protection. And then he'll go up and really snap the ball with his actual cadence. But I don't think a young rookie quarterback would be able to operate pre-snap at the line of scrimmage at the elite level that Russell Wilson is right now. And for me, that's what's selling me more and more each and every week on keeping Russell Wilson around, because I just don't feel like we could bring somebody in and plug them into this Sean Payton offense and they would operate pre-snap at the high level that Russell Wilson is. So hats off to you, Russ. You're really starting to convince me.
And what this is illustrating, too, is the importance of getting the play call in with plenty of seconds left on the clock, because last year that was an issue. Russ was being forced to have to snap the ball very quickly because the play clock wasn't coming in, or the play call wasn't coming in. It took a while to make the call in the huddle. Here, Sean Payton, it's one of the things that he focuses on, one of the things he's known for, is the tempo of the game, and it's been fantastic. And Russ has not been making mistakes. He's not, you have the fumble here and there, and they're drive killers when it happens, but he's not making the foolish mistakes. And the fact that you have 17 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and he has more touchdowns inside the red zone as of now than he had in the season last year. I mean, that's just an incredible statistic. It's forced Good Morning Football to even put a graphic up. Thank goodness for Peter Schrager. He's been on the Broncos train and being very fair about it for most of the season. So, but the fact that Russ is finally getting some kudos and not getting unnecessarily beaten up is a great thing, and I think it's really helped his confidence as well.
Plus the Kyle Brandt butthurt looks every time they bring up Russell Wilson
or
the Broncos.
But I will say though, we do have to give him credit because he basically was saying like enough's enough. Granted, like it's been a while, but enough is enough. Like we can't talk about last year anymore. With the way that winning streak is going, like he is proving week after week, that he's very clearly not the same Russell Wilson of 2022. And Brent talked about that. So I think as much as it tastes like vinegar coming out of our mouths and, praising Kyle Brandt, you've got to at least give him praise in the fact that he's at least understanding and realizing that, this team is very different than 2022, but to kind of pull it back a little bit, it is funny that it would take a 5-game winning streak, and you being there, firsthand, if you will, on a Manning cast for you to finally realize, oh, you know what, this team is, a little bit different. In terms of, with 2022. But again, kudos to Russ because, the way that he's playing is again, like we talk about how this team is not hitting this stride. Russell Wilson hasn't even hit his stride in terms of the passing game. And it's really important that we even talk about the statistics part of this because the stats of it, they don't look pretty. Like they look like you're looking at maybe like a Tim Tebow stat line, if you will, like in terms of passing yards, and everything. But again, it goes back to what he's been able to do in the red zone. But even then, he's not putting forth the 200, and I think he had 250 some yards, 260 some yards against the Vikings. But the passing touchdowns, so I mean, he's not really having the 260 yards and 4 touchdowns or something, like a game that's really separating himself. But the moment he does have those games is, I think, where maybe you'll see the national media more and more really come to this idea that, wow, you know what? Russ is playing well. He is playing exceptionally well because he's keeping pace. That's the funny thing is he's keeping pace with some of these other players, in terms of the touchdown to interception ratio. He's at 20, which is near the tops of the league. But he still hasn't had much separation in terms of 3 touchdowns a game in terms of through the air and even running. So I mean, it's even he hasn't really hit his stride in terms of with some of the stuff and touchdowns and stuff like that.
Yep.
Agreed. Hey, do you want to take this question?
I was going to say, Jody wants to know how much you think Russ's weight loss is helping this year.
I definitely think it has. I mean, you can see just the twitchiness and mobility that he has in the pocket. I mean, it's not Russell Wilson from 2015, 2016 by any means, but it is certainly a lot better than last year. And you can just see Russell Wilson has that confidence to hit that escape lane. When he sees man coverage and sees a wide open rushing lane, he has the confidence to hit it. I think that weight loss has been a massive part of it, but just overall, the play calling, the situational awareness from Russ, it all pivots back to coaching, from Sean Payton to Davis Webb, the quarterback's coach, to Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator. He's operating within the realm of structure that they want him to operate in. But at the same time, when the play breaks down, he's still able to make things happen. I thought that the Cleveland game was one of Russell Wilson's best games, beating the blitz. Like, there were several times where Jim Schwartz brought the house and Russell Wilson wasn't afraid to hit his back foot, lob one up, and there were guys wide open. I mean, Cortland Sutton, I believe Jerry Jeudy on one of them. The way that Russell Wilson was able to beat the blitz against Cleveland was one of my most impressive things that I've seen from Russell Wilson recently.
What I was going to say, to your point, Gage, I think the reason why I think the Broncos were doing so well, or in particular Russ, with the blitz, is the game that they had prior against the Minnesota Vikings. Like, the Vikings were a heavy blitz team, and Russ did an exceptional job against the Vikings. So in a way, the preparation for the Vikings prepared you for the Browns, right? So it's just like, and it goes to, again, to the coaching and how that Russ has been that kind of veteran presence and calming presence within, what's going on. And, and so it's nice to also finally get a chance to hear the comments from Russ, even though it's been consistent in his time in Denver. It's finally gratifying to hear his comments after games and realize, one, it stayed the same, and two, he's always believed, right? Because one of the videos that I always come back on, I grabbed it, and you guys can go check it out on my Twitter handle. But it's a clip that did happen in 2022. I should preface this, but it did happen in 2022, and it was captured by the Broncos team account and their YouTube account when they did the video. In fact, I think I sent it over to Glenn when it happened. But it was he and Justin Simmons talking about it. Mm-hmm. Like, it was an interview, and he talks about the relentless belief. The relentless belief. And he talked about that countless times. He even brought it up in the post-game presser against the Browns, like that relentless belief that you are getting to the point where they really are believing. And I know it may sound cliche, and I know we said it earlier, but like, you are starting to really see it unfold. And so, like, to use the comparison, like, I really think you are starting to kind of see, to a certain extent, somewhat of a Seattle comparison, in that you had Earl Thomas really lead the back end as a captain of that secondary, and you have Justin Simmons, a captain and leader of that secondary, and of the entire defense, if you will, and of course Russ handling the offense. So it's just like, it's great to finally see the final pieces come into place in terms of this team, from the leadership and of course the skill positions.
Broncos country. That's right.
I don't think he's ever going to say that again.
I don't think so either. Dear God, I hope not.
God, no. That era is dead.
The only time I think he should ever use that is if maybe it's a big playoff win, or we won the Super Bowl.
All right.
So maybe if he's getting on the parade float and he can say, "Let's ride,"
Yeah,
that would be the only thing. I just can't imagine that it's going to be dug out of the mothballs.
So I saw a comment. No, go ahead. No.
Nope.
So I saw a comment earlier about Garrett Bowles. If the Broncos should restructure his deal, I just pulled up Garrett Bowles' contract right here. Following this season, he's got a cap number of $20 million. 15.75 of it is base salary. $4 million is a prorated bonus, and then $250,000 per game roster bonus. None of it is guaranteed. So I think that one way the Broncos could maybe alleviate this a little bit is to extend Garrett Bowles maybe a year or two. It would give them some short-term cap relief, and they could spread some of that money around as a signing bonus in future years. So in terms of addressing Garrett Bowles and keeping the continuity on the offensive line and ensuring that Garrett Bowles retires as a Denver Bronco, I feel like the Broncos really should offer him this like maybe 2-3 year extension, so that way he can shore up those final years here in Denver.
Well, and to be fair, yes, this is coming from someone who does not make that kind of money. For a left tackle, that's not actually that bad.
It's not, but at the same time, though, I mean, that's still one you want to probably think about extending him or something like that sooner rather than later, and it would still give the Broncos Broncos some short-term cap relief if they elected to make that move.
See if you can drop like $5 million off the cap hit or something.
Yeah, and again, just give him a big old fat signing bonus.
And at the risk of sounding negative, Garrett hasn't been the most consistent performer throughout his career.
Yeah.
So even though he's having a stellar year right now, you just don't know about that. So I think what Gage is suggesting is the only strategy outside of them releasing him or trading him, and I just don't think that that's going to happen with this line gelling the way it has.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And another side story, it was something I didn't even think about while the games are going on. But we played the Vikings, and we saw the return of Dalton Reiser. And then we saw the Browns, and we saw the return of Shelby Harris. I didn't even realize that Shelby Harris was on the Browns. And I'm like, hey, that's Shelby Harris they just showed on TV.
It was a great moment. It was a great moment. I believe the NFL account, shared it. It was between, I believe it was like the PR guy. It was the PR guy, and it was Cortland Sutton. It was just great to see. I mean, I will say, maybe from a Browns perspective, that was a pretty bad look. Maybe, but I think it just goes to show you, despite the losses, despite the losing culture that was here, and even with Shelby here, how great Shelby Harris is as a person, and and also it basically shows you that he loves his teammates. Like, again, he loves his teammates. He loves Denver, and maybe he is second guessing now. Maybe just a little bit after a game like that he wishes that he was, still a Denver Bronco. And of course, with him being a Cleveland Brown, that also makes it, and the play of Russell Wilson, the fact that, the Broncos won the trade, right? Exactly. The Broncos actually won that trade over the Seattle Seahawks because Drew Lock is the backup. Noah Fant is back to kind of being the Noah Fant, if not worse. Shelby Harris was the guy we traded with the big contract, and he's no longer a Seahawk. So it's just like, I'm just saying, like, it's getting to the point where, like, the more Russ even plays well too, like, the more that trade even looks better. And the more the Deshaun Watson contract and everything is, in fact, the worst contract in sports.
As an Iowa guy, Cam, I'm surprised. I was going to say, as an Iowa guy, I'm surprised Cam took a shot at Noah Fant. I mean, that really is shocking.
Technically, he's a Nebraska guy. So, like, he was he's from Nebraska. Nebraska should have recruited him, and obviously he went to Iowa, and we know that Iowa, breeds tight ends like it's no one's business. So,
yep. And even looking at the players that the Seattle Seahawks got in the draft with the picks, I mean, Charles Cross, he's the 41st graded offensive tackle in the league right now. Probably not necessarily worth the 9th overall pick. Devin Witherspoon's been great. I can't really say too much about that. But then you got Boye Mafe, who's had some spurts of being really good, but overall you want to see more consistency from him. And then you've got, I believe it's Derek Hall, another edge rusher that I don't really know too much about.
Does he even exist?
Exactly. It's like, at the end of the day, did Seattle really win that trade?
Well, plus,
the worst part of the trade now looks like it was Enrique. That we, that's the worst part for us now.
Yep.
But like, look back on it, right? Like, you have all these people that are going after Russell Wilson. Like, we should have just kept Drew Lock. He would have been just fine. He would have gotten better. What happened when Drew Lock went in the game? Lost him the game again.
He was terrible in that game.
Well, and again, like, I just think it's so funny, and it's why I tweeted it the other day, but it's like, it's just so funny to talk about how when people really say, like, that trade was one-sided in favor of Seattle. Like, do you guys not realize that this is not an RG3 trade where you're trading, picks for this year, next year, and the year after? Like, it was this year and next year. Like, it was what was it? It was like the current year,
last year and this year.
Right. So it was just like,
now.
It was only 2 years. And by that same token, it kind of canceled out once you acquired or you traded Bradley Chubb for that first round pick, which resulted in Sean Payton. So it's just like, and then of course, people want to talk about this whole contract idea. And I realize that the contract may in vain be a part of that deal. But on the surface, when you look at the trade itself, it wasn't. Like it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like he didn't sign that contract until after that trade happened. So I mean, on the surface, yeah, maybe the contract was, in air quotes, was a part of that trade. But like if you're looking solely at the trade though, like it's more and more in favor of Denver than it was, Seattle. And this dumb idea that Russ didn't want to be a Bronco or something like this. It's like he had a no trade clause. And when you have a no trade clause, for anybody that doesn't know how that works, you have to waive your no trade clause to the team that you would like to go to, right?
Yep.
And he wanted to go to the Broncos.
But also there's usually a quid pro quo with something like that. So there, in my opinion, and I really wish there would be some confirmation of this, but I can't imagine there's any chance that he would agree to the trade, even if he wanted to come here without a solid extension agreement in place. There's no chance that wasn't part of the deal.
I agree.
And you also have to remember. No, go ahead.
Oh, I agree with you, Glenn. I agree with you, but I just think just as far as like on the whole, like on the surface of a whole, which is looking at the trade, you're not really looking at it from the extension point of view. It's just like the other layer off of that trade. But the trade itself, you're not really thinking extension because he did have the 2 years left on his deal.
Yep. And with the new ownership group, they fully signed off on that extension. And you have to imagine they probably at least considered the possibility that it could blow up in their face. They knew financially what they were getting into when this extension was signed, and they knew that there was probably a way that they could get out of that deal if it blew up in their face. So again, this is another perk of having the richest ownership group in sports. We can do deals like this, and if we have to fork out the dough to get out of those deals, I don't think ownership will blink twice to do it. Not saying the Broncos are going to do that here, actually, because I think Russell Wilson is starting to play well enough to justify keeping him around, and we can deal with the financial ramifications down the road if we need to. Like, at this point, Russell Wilson is starting to play well enough to where the Broncos could seriously go on a championship run next year. Dare I say it, if they get the remaining pieces in place to complete this roster, this could be a championship team with Russell Wilson under center next year. I fully feel like the Broncos could go all in on next year being the year to that we get over the hump and get to a championship.
Well, and I also feel like at this point, like the extension no longer is boneheaded. The trade is no longer boneheaded, right? Like I feel like it has now been proven that Peyton and the ownership was right by bringing in Russ, because the Russ we saw last year obviously it was a Hackett problem, right? Like I think
more and more.
I think we're beyond that point, right? Like it wasn't a Russ problem, it was a Hackett problem. Because now we're seeing the Russ that we thought we were getting. And when we thought we were getting the Russ that played in Seattle, nobody had a problem with the trade or the extension.
Yep. Correct. Every single GM in the NFL basically would have made that trade at the time. Like at the time, the Broncos were getting high praise for fleecing the Seahawks. Basically.
Yeah. I'll never forget. I was the saddest part of the trade to me was that Shelby Harris was shipped away from the Broncos just as the Broncos were going to be great.
Agreed. Yeah. And to pivot back to Shelby, I saw him pregame and he was signing autographs for Broncos fans. He still has such a deep love for Broncos country. He still lives here in Denver. Right, I mean, and the Broncos brought him in for a workout this offseason. I don't know if it was the team that elected not to sign him or if Shelby decided that he wanted to go in a different direction. Maybe the Browns offered more money because if I'm not mistaken, it was pretty shortly thereafter that Cleveland scooped up and signed him. But you have to imagine that Shelby Harris, just like Cam alluded to, is kind of having a little bit of regret there. I mean, getting to stay home and play with this group of guys. I mean, he was dapping up Justin Simmons pregame. That's something I saw as well. You know, he still loves a lot of guys in this locker room. Even Russ, he had a long conversation with Russ, the guy he never was on a team with. I mean, you would think that maybe he'd have that little bit of animosity towards Russ because he was kind of the reason why he ended up getting shipped out of Denver. But no, those two had a good 5-minute conversation pregame.
And I wish we had Shelby. He would help so much in the run game right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I miss him.
You know, and to your point though, Gage, like I think this is the twist. I think it's nice to compare like maybe to what you're seeing in terms of like the Tebow years, because the Tebow years is what launched us into like the Peyton Manning era, right? The thing that's so actually beautiful in this sense is you actually have Russell Wilson now on your team. So like the moment that you have that quarterback and he's playing at such a high level like that, and with the team that the way that they're playing, like more and more, if you are going to be playing at such a high level and even down the line, I will say this, like even if you don't make the playoffs, you are playing at high quality football. You're playing high quality football so much in every single game that, look, the Detroit Lions didn't make the playoffs last year, but you know what happened? You know what happened? They were the darlings of the offseason, you know, and so much so that, you know, they were a team that was really, you know, a lot of people were on in terms of that, the NFC, and look at the reason why this year. I mean, so I think that it is certainly possible that people will look at the Broncos as a destination again, right? And which was never the case, you know, the moment Peyton Manning left the building. And so the more this continues, you're also talking about it being a prime destination one more time again, thanks to Sean Payton, Russell Wilson, you know, and just the entire environment that is now going on with the Valley, because of course we have owners that are willing to spend money as well. So it's just like, it's an amazing scenario to be in for the Broncos in terms of with where they are at now and winning in this winning streak.
And I've said it before.
This comment by Jody is my everything right now.
I agree.
Allen over Jones was a very under the radar signing. Sorry,
could not agree more.
Yeah.
No, I've said it before, and not too long ago we had bickering kids in charge. And now we have the richest owners in sports. I mean, just so fortunate that this is the case.
And next year, I mean, we'll address this in 1 second. I just want to talk about our ownership for a second, because the more and more I look at our ownership group, the more and more grateful I am that we have it, because you see what's going on in Carolina right now with David Tepper, who's quickly becoming one of the worst owners in sports, both in the NFL as well as MLS with the Charlotte FC. I mean, David Tepper is doing a horrible job right now. And the fact that the Broncos are in this situation with our current ownership group, I mean, dude, it's insane.
Yeah.
Can you pull up that other comment again?
David Tepper had
which one?
Daniel Snyder.
The one before the last one.
David Tepper had Daniel Snyder trending yesterday as the David Tepper is the worst owner since Daniel Snyder.
No, it was
$20 million over the cap.
Jody's.
I forgot what it was. It was a good one. Yeah, I think it was
earlier.
Yes, this one. Yeah, sorry, I completely lost what it was, but I remember it was a good comment. So, to address this again, the Broncos have cash. It's really all about if you have cash or not necessarily the cap room, because that number can be significantly manipulated. They say it's a hard cap, but it's really not. It's really just if you have cash or not.
Well, plus the cap's going to go up.
It goes up every year. It goes up.
So Gage, going back to that, give us some points on how you would manipulate. You know, if you have some examples with the cash on certain players, maybe next year.
Well, the big one is like your standard converting base salary to signing bonuses, just giving players big signing bonuses, because when you ink a player to a contract, you have to have that money ready to go to put into an escrow account. Some teams literally do not have the liquid cash to put into an escrow account to sign these big deals. The Broncos do. So that's what it's ultimately all about. I'm not a cap expert. That's more of Zach Seeger's repertoire. I'd like to get him maybe back on the show at some point, and maybe we could have this discussion with Zach Seeger's, because that's more of his repertoire is the cap manipulation. But I know those are the two basic ways that you can do that.
There you go, Gage. Go get him.
I mean, Yes, Zach Allen has had some issues against the run, but I mean, he had that safety to basically close the game. He's been almost like a closer for the Broncos. He's made an impact. He's taken on double teams for us. You know, he's opened up the door for some of these young edge rushers to win. I think this Zach Allen signing has been really impactful.
Sorry, I believe he's top 10 in quarterback pressures this year, isn't he?
I couldn't tell you. I haven't really looked at those numbers,
but also the fact is we were either going to sign Draymond Jones or bring in somebody else like a Zach Allen. So and when you actually compare those two side by side up to this point for this season,
apparently not.
It's no comparison. It's the Zach Allen is just outperforming. And like Gage said, you know, he has had some struggles. Yeah. He started the year very, very slowly, but he's come on like wildfire as his defense has turned things around.
So I was going to say, here's a comparison for you. Zach Allen, 42 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 16 QB hits, 3.5 sacks. One of them was a safety against the Cleveland Browns. 16 pressures. Draymond Jones, 26 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 9 QB hits, 2.5 sacks, 0 forced fumbles, 13 pressures. Zach Allen is outperforming Draymond Jones, and they both played 11 games. There's no way else to say that. Like Allen is outperforming, I mean, it's just, he's playing really well.
Not to speak for Jeff, but I think he's probably suggesting, that he is the highest paid player on our defense, even higher paid than Justin. So perhaps, like that type of output, does it justify the salary that he's making this year? I don't know. Right now, the defense is really gelling. And, with the exception of the run defense that we've talked about already tonight, it's a solid core, and he seems to get more energy as the game runs on, which is interesting for a guy his size.
Yeah. See, and this is exactly where I was going to go with it, is you look at Derek Wolfe is a great example, right? Not a lot of sacks, but he was able to get the pressures, put the quarterback in the situation to where he made a mistake. It's the same thing that Zach Allen does. I'm not expecting Zach Allen to get a whole bunch of sacks. That's what we've got. That's what we have Cooper for. That's what we have Benito for. That's what we got Browning for. The guys off the edge getting sacks. That's what they're there for. Zach Allen is to help put pressure on the quarterback so that he can help either the secondary get an interception or the linebacker can come up and hit him and cause a fumble. That's what Zach Allen's there for, is to put the quarterback in a bad situation to turn the ball over.
Zach's numbers are actually pretty solid for an interior defensive lineman at the end of the day. For a guy that's basically taking on all those double teams, taking on all the trash in that interior to help set things up for the edge rush guys. That's what Zach Allen is here to do. He's here to do the dirty work, basically. And all the edge rushers get to have all the fun, basically, when it comes to the raw stats. But don't get me wrong, Zach Allen's production isn't going unnoticed in those defensive meeting rooms. He has probably gotten multiple game balls. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he got one for this Cleveland Browns game.
And one of the things, too, is he was the only, starter that actually played for VJ before. But, Mike mentioned Baron Browning, and we're 54 minutes into the show. And one of the pivotal plays of the game, that's one of the most talked about plays of the game, was the Browning hit. That was clean as can be. Quarterback got the bloodied mouth and the concussion when his chin hit the ground. Baron did it textbook. I just don't understand. I'm bracing myself for this giant fine that's barreling down, at him. But what do you guys think of that whole situation there?
It's just,
first of all, I love how Cam and I were both like,
do you want to go first, Cage, or do you want me to go?
I'll go. Just first of all, he held on to the ball for 10 seconds or whatever it was. At some point, you don't get afforded protection if you're holding on to the ball long enough to set up a campsite. Sorry. He rolled also 10 yards back into the freaking end zone. So,
Yeah.
but in terms of the hit itself, it was 100% legal and clean. It was a hard hit. It shook him up. It gave him a concussion, had him spitting blood out of his mouth. But again, there was nothing about that hit that was illegal or egregious. I saw a tweet. I'm not going to give that guy any credit, so I'm not going to mention his name, but saying that this was coached and that this is Sean Payton and all this stuff. I can't think of a more egregious statement, quite frankly. That is football. That is just good old-fashioned football. Guys are going to take hard hits. They can claim that he launched himself, but what the hell else is he going to do? Not tackle him? He's got to make the play. He can't help it that DTR was contorting his body in a certain way when he was trying to yeet that ball out that left him in a vulnerable position. Just like what Tom Brady said, man, it's on offensive players to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Listen, I just want a check mark on the board that this is the first time yeet has been used on the 5280 podcast.
Not true. Not true.
I don't believe you.
I have to imagine I've used it at least once before.
You know,
putrid has already been marked down too. By the way.
This is the beauty of the 5280 podcast, though, is we get to appeal to all generations now by using the words yeet. So
I thought by having this lineup, I thought you were saying,
yeah.
I was going to say, how dare you?
But I just think that especially to like the call itself, we're getting to the point where it's a reputation call. Like it's a reputation call at this point. Like because the Broncos have the reputation with what's going on with Kareem Jackson, it's just simply a reputation call. Like, yeah, he may have launched himself, but when the moment he did launch himself, he hit him in the shoulder. And, you know, again, not to give the guy too much, credit what, that he doesn't deserve, but like,
oh, I'm dead. Is what the fuck is yeet?
But no, it's fine. It's fine. But I think that like the thing that just makes it so upsetting is when you even have unknowledgeable people, right? Like unknowledgeable people that think like they know what they're talking about when they're just making up and creating their own story. For instance, thinking PJ Locke hitting Amari Cooper in the ribs, like hitting him in the ribs is a illegal hit. Like I just think that like, so we're phrasing this and just picking apart because of the fact that you guys actually hate Sean Payton and turning this into Bountygate 2.0, that you guys just truly think that like that the Broncos are just, in it to just injure people and, make their lives absolutely, hell. And I think the one thing that you can definitely say, is the Broncos are playing a physical brand of football. Like you can say that, but by no means are they dirty, right? And by no means are they dirty. But hitting a guy in the ribs and calling it,
he shoved him.
He didn't even. It was with his hands too first. Like it was. So I mean, it's like this idea that like they're creating narratives, they're creating stories that are absolutely meaningless. It just goes to show you that there are ball knowers and non-ball knowers, and surprisingly, there are a lot of non-ball knowers out there, more so than maybe some ball knowers out there. But thankfully, the 5280
sounds like something else on 5280 After Dark. But anyway,
but the 5280 podcast, though,
I want to read this tweet from a non-ball knower. Paxton Lynch is Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Cam Newton rolled into one human body.
Yeah, exactly. When I
Ball knowers brought to you by Manscaped. Yes, I love it.
That's fantastic.
And
our first read.
Just because of the shorts that I'm going to make after this episode, I'm keeping this comment up here.
No, but to just call it, full circle, Paxton Lynch was the first player that I ever looked at as a prospect. It's one of the reasons why I subtly thanked him on the on the mainly episode that we did of like what we're thankful for. But the reason why I thanked him was because that was the first prospect I watched, So, but the thing I ever went to is the thing that is like the thing that all draft experts, kind of fall victim to, and that is comparisons. And when you fall into comparisons, you lump them into different players. And yeah, but the funniest thing is like, that's also not the worst Paxton Lynch tweet I ever had. I also said that he would be better than Jared Goff. I said that he would be better than Carson Wentz, and Jared Goff and Carson Wentz have been to a Super Bowl. So, I mean, it's not the it's not the only worst thing I've actually said about Paxton Lynch.
Travis Kelce saw Cam's old tweets and they're like, man, these are stupid.
Oh man, I imagine you'll find some of my Drew Lock tweets from like 2020, especially, that I'm just like, oh my god, dude, what were you doing?
So
if only he had a chance. If only Drew had a chance.
Oh yeah. So yeah. So obviously we've talked about everything that's gone on in the past. Now we need to talk about the Texans, because this is going to be a huge game to decide. Maybe it won't decide right now who's going into the playoffs, but I love the way that it was put, where if the Broncos beat the Texans now, we are in the playoffs and we have to fight to stay in, instead of losing and having to fight to get in.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that that's what made, in some shape or form, the Jacksonville and Houston game so fascinating, because and also at the end of the day, like the AFC South is not decided yet. So the Broncos still have to control the business that is at hand. And if they do beat the Houston Texans, that will obviously go a long way, for playoff positioning. But, to that same vein, like, it's one of the reasons why we called not just the Houston game, but the Cleveland game and the Houston game 2 prime games in order for, a true playoff positioning, right? Because like, it was the Cleveland and Houston, and then upcoming, obviously, I would say against the Detroit Lions. But like, it's really important, for the Broncos to really just continue to take care of business. Now it'll be interesting. It was a flexed game. The Houston game was flexed. It's an 11 o'clock game now. We know, at least on the history side of things, the Broncos never really have played well when it came to the 11 o'clock games. But I think with Sean Payton, there's really not much you have to worry about in terms of that anymore. I do think in a subtle way. I don't think it's actually in the sense of the word like going to decide Coach of the Year. But funny enough, I do think that this game could be one of those ramifications of, possibly Coach of the Year as well, because D'Amico Ryans has his team, playing exceptionally well. So I think watching the chess game unfold with Ryans and Sean Payton, I think will be fascinating to watch between a rookie coach and, I mean, I guess you could say a rookie coach again, but like we all know that Sean Payton is a vet coach in this business. So to kind of see them going back and forth, I think in this Texans game is going to be really fun to watch.
And I did not have Patrick Surtain, Tank Dell on my bingo card, but that matchup is something I'm really looking forward to.
That's going to be a fun one for sure. Yeah, to pivot back to that Texans game with CJ Stroud, man, just the way that he's been playing as a rookie, he is processing at such an elite level. He's making full field reads as a rookie, which is something that you rarely see. He's putting up the raw stats, yes, but he's also putting up some really good stuff on film. Broncos are going to have their work cut out for them defensively. This is going to be a big test for this defense, but also offensively, this is going to be one where the Broncos are probably going to have to score some points. Like, they're going to have to potentially keep up in a shootout with this Texans team. That this could be a game where we see like a 35-31 kind of score or something like that. That this is going to be a big time matchup for not only this defense, but for this offense as well. And it's going to be a real balls to the wall kind of game.
Yeah, it's one of those grinded games, right? Like those grinded games. And, again, like we say it so often before, but don't be surprised if they do the exact same game plan. I know it's not going to look pretty, but don't be surprised if it's the same exact game plan. And, and for the Texans, like who knows, they may play a little bit more urgency, right? Because Jacksonville also came out and played a little bit more efficient. I mean, and so I think it could be, first and foremost, I got to say though, like if Dameon Pierce is able to play, that's going to be a significant upgrade, for that, for that run game. And maybe by that same token, it really doesn't matter because we know that the Broncos run defense has been really suspect. So it may not actually matter, who's at running back. But
or Tyler Lancaster, baby.
Right. But I think but they have to be on their P's and Q's against the Houston Texans. And as much as we want to give D'Amico Ryans, the credit and of course, CJ Stroud, Bob Slowick, like he's one of those guys that is part of that Shanahan tree that is really moving up and up and up in terms of possibly being a head coaching candidate in this cycle. And it would not be surprised if you see, his name, mentioned in terms of head coaching candidate interviews and possibly even getting a job. It's just so funny to think about the Texans because, like, at one point, the Carolina Panthers let go of Josh McCown, right? And at one point, the Houston Texans interviewed Josh McCown twice for a head coaching interview. And to think about, like, where they've come with I should say, like, the same ownership, right? And they were given a lot of grief. Houston was, but the fact that they made two pillar moves and actually three pillar moves, if you will, of, drafting CJ Stroud and drafting Will Anderson and then drafting a player that Stroud wanted in Tank Dell and turning him into, the player that we all saw in film. Like, he was a productive wide receiver coming out of college. What we're seeing now is, not at all what surprised me because he was a productive wide receiver in college. He was used appropriately in the offense that he was. Like, he's an explosive athlete. So the Broncos do have their work cut out for him in space when it comes to Tank Dell.
And Nico Collins even has better statistics outside of touchdowns than Tank.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So basically,
Texans seems low-key loaded.
At this point, we need to have the Texans lose and the Colts lose. So obviously the Texans are going to lose because they're playing the Broncos and we're better. But if the Colts lose as well, then the Broncos go to the 7th seed. If the Browns lose, Broncos win. Broncos go to the 6th seed.
Yeah,
I don't believe we have a tiebreaker over the Steelers. So Steelers will stay at 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did simulations on this yesterday.
As Jeff pointed out earlier, too, the Steelers have 2 tough games against Baltimore coming up.
Which is funny because the Steelers also have like the easiest remaining schedule. I don't know how it always works out that way, but they have like the easiest remaining schedule, the rest of the way, for any team. So, I mean, it's just, for like the Steelers, like they even have it in their favor too, to a certain degree. But yeah, the Broncos, and I do agree, D'Amico Ryans was obviously their best move because coaching trumps everything. But yeah, they have their work cut out for them. And, I think for the Indianapolis Colts, it's important to bring out the news that also broke out today that Jonathan Taylor is expected to miss multiple weeks. Mm-hmm. So if there is ever a possible hit to playoff chances for Indianapolis, that's a big part of that. But also we saw sort of to what Zach Moss was able to do in Jonathan Taylor's absence. So maybe it kind of negates it just a little bit. But yeah, what
happened to him? I didn't hear. I didn't see that.
Thumb surgery. He's gonna be out 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Dang.
So
and like
Bronco Bill's like, yes.
Yeah. and I don't want to get
injury.
I don't want to get too excited about the possibilities, but the AFC West is still in reach for the Broncos to win. They're only 2 games up.
Yeah,
and without falling into a deep depression, the fact is we lost to the Raiders, we lost to the Commanders, and we lost to the Jets. And with those 3 wins, I know, we would be in first place at this point. I mean, that is crazy.
Yeah.
It is super crazy to think that despite all this talk about the wild card and everything, like that they are in a possible hunt for like the possible AFC title again, because and it goes back to what we see this year. Like Kansas City is probably the team you're most likely to predict to win the division, obviously, because what we've seen in years prior, but like they're also beatable. The Broncos proved that. Like the Broncos proved that, and and so like it's certainly possible and within the realm of possibility that Kansas City loses a few games here and there, that they loses a few games. And I think that the one thing, and I bring this back in terms of like the memory card and the memory bank with this, but like as far as like back when the Broncos like were on their winning streak as far as like winning the AFC, there were games under Andy Reid. Like there were games under Andy Reid that he would lose that he should never have lost. Case in point, like for instance, like that Bronco game, you could argue like he should never have lost to the Broncos, like 24-9. We can argue flu game. We can argue any sort of excuse. They never should have, lost the game when all is said and done. And so like when you have that also margin of error in how bad you have been playing this year, like it gives you a chance, the Broncos, the opportunity to possibly move up those standings. So it was big, and it feels so good, Ty Bowen. It just feels so good to have a winning record heading into the first day of December. Like it just feels so good to say.
So the Chiefs' remaining schedule is first against the Packers, then the Bills, then the Patriots, Raiders, Bengals, Chargers. So there's easily like games they could lose depending on the version of the Packers you're getting and depending on the version of Josh Allen you're getting. But I think they have just as good a shot as winning all the rest of their games as the Broncos do.
Well, but
I don't know.
Well, but here's the thing. It's like, so this is why it was so important for that Baltimore win over to the Chargers. That theoretically eliminated the Chargers. So what's beautiful now, and I mean, I say this for the Kansas City point of view, not the Bronco point of view, because I don't want to think about that. Like the Chargers have the most beautiful thing in being the ultimate spoiler for teams in the playoff hunt, right? And I think that's what makes it a little bit scary for the Broncos' perspective. But I think what makes it beautiful is they haven't played them twice yet. So like, so I think that for the Chargers, they have that ultimate opportunity where they can be that spoiler. So meaning like they can beat the Chiefs. Like, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, because they have Herbert and the offensive-minded guy in Kellen Moore. Like they could sneak a win against the Chiefs, and I wouldn't even be the least bit surprised.
Yeah, and Buffalo as well, man. Like they always seem to go into Arrowhead and play well. And even against Philadelphia, I thought Buffalo was starting to figure some things out offensively. Like Josh Allen was playing some really damn good football against Philadelphia. And if that version of Josh Allen shows up, then the Bills could beat almost anybody. So I think that the Bills have a good chance of going into Kansas City and getting that win and trying to at least get their season back on track. But the Broncos have that tiebreaker over the Bills. So even if the Bills were to get their shit together, they still have to, in theory, get past the Denver Broncos.
That's right.
Yeah. So lots of possibilities, lots of things that could potentially happen. It's been a great show. I did not think we were going to go this long. There's just more to talk about than I thought there was. Like
lively comments. I loved it.
I mean, there's lots of, like, when we're losing, there's so much to talk about. Like, oh, this sucks, they suck.
Depends.
Burn them at the stake. But then, like, now we're winning. I'm like, wow, there's not much to talk about. And now we've gone almost an hour 15. So I love it. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Anything else you want to cover?
Well, I was going to say, like, yeah, there's a lot to talk about, like, when you're losing. But the sad reality is you don't want to talk about it when you're losing. But when you're winning, as we said, cheers everything. And, you know, the 5280 podcast is full of ball knowers. So, I mean, like, I wouldn't expect anything else. I mean, like, because we know our stuff. Sponsored by Manscaped.
Sponsored by ball knowers.
I thought Cam was going to say something favorable about Paxton Lynch to close out the show. I wasn't sure.
There you go.
He's a really good video game player.
He's tall. Yeah.
He's probably not even good at that.
A really good video competition with the Paxton Lynch and Kyler Murray in Call of Duty.
Final score predictions for the Broncos and the Texans. Who do you got?
I hate
Broncos
to do it.
31-27.
I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to. 35-31 Texans.
But you picked the Browns too, so keep it up.
Yeah, stick with it.
I think what was it before the season? I predicted a W here, like for the Texans. So I'll keep the train rolling here. I'll pick a W. I will say it's close. I will say 27-24.
I think it's going to be 28-27 Broncos. I think they're going to miss it.
Okay, Scorigami.
You're welcome. Roger wants to talk about the tight end position. Why don't we utilize the tight end position besides just to block? It's because Dulcich is still out on injured reserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have one open spot left on the roster, and there's speculation that Brandon Johnson could be that guy. There's speculation that Greg Dulcich could be that guy.
Yeah.
Gage, do you have any idea who that's expected to be?
I think the indications are it's going to be Brandon Johnson.
It's going to be interesting because Brandon Johnson has a relationship.
No more Dulcich then for the year?
No, I think he'll still come back at some point, just probably not this week. It probably is going to be Brandon this week. What were you saying, Cam?
No, just Brandon Johnson's going to be a key addition because, at the early part of the season, as much as it was not really a winning streak per se, but he was an impactful part of the wide receiver room. So it's just one more opportunity for them to divvy up some targets for that offense, and frankly, might even open up the offense just a little bit more because we know Russ does trust a guy like Brandon Johnson. I think the thing is though, you do miss Dulcich, right? And maybe this is a fun topic to at least end it on because I know that a friend of the show, Mario Batanzi, put it out there on Twitter. But do the Broncos actually regret, or do we as fans regret the actual trade of Alberto Cuevidom to the Philadelphia Eagles? And I think that, it's easy to look at it like the idea that, the best way to look at it is the Trinity Benson argument, right? As much as, he performed really well in that preseason game, and it would be great, and it would be great with Greg Dulcich now injured to have a second guy that you can go to that's an athletic, dynamic threat. When you get an offer from the Philadelphia Eagles, from an aggressive GM like Howie Roseman, you can't pass that up. You can't pass an opportunity like that up. So it's the Trinity Benson argument. It pains you. It certainly pains you, but it's frustrating. But I do think Dulcich coming back, though, if he does come back, and if he's healthy, that's the big thing here. And knock on wood. But it's the big thing. But if he does come back into this offense, he could really help take this offense to that other level. To what was mentioned about the tight end position, because the Broncos do need a threat with that tight end that can be able to spread the field, the middle of the field, and everything. So, yeah. Now, the thing is, if we are not number one because of the fact we use yeet on the podcast,
and
flowers.
And flowers.
Gage was just comparing someone to Zay Flowers. I think you misheard him.
Minus the celebration, of course.
Yep.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about? Anything else you guys want to? Okay. Well, I appreciate every single person that was in the chat. Michael, so good. Blame Gage, not me. Love it.
Okay.
Blame Gage, not me. Michael Carmelini in the chat. Broncos Breakdown. Jay Bryan, Sports Nonsense. Roger, Jolene. There's so many other ones to thank. But thanks for joining us in the show. It's been a very lively show. And if you like this one, go check out all the other shows that are on the network. We got shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then The Neighborhood, which is every game day. Go check that out as well. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country. And we'll see you guys later. Peace out, everybody!
Fast lane when I pass in the street. Bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come